Welcome back to the OIS podcast. This week, Dr. Sadri is joined by Sean Lanchulev, who Asan refers to as the Steve Jobs of ophthalmology. Let's hear why.
Hi, everybody. This is Asan Sadri. I'm a board-certified ophthalmologist here in Newport Beach, California. Also co-founder and a GP of Visionary Ventures here in Southern Cal. We're actually kind of a unique time, 2020 with COVID. Now we have wildfires, believe it or not. So I'm waiting for the earthquake to happen, and I hope it won't happen. But I'm absolutely delighted and excited to have my friend join us. He needs no introductions, but Dr. Lanchulev, Sean is a good friend, a true savant in ophthalmology. For those of you who know him, it's just a true pleasure to get him on here and talk about his background and his unique sort of out-of-the-box approach towards unmet needs in ophthalmology. There's a lot we can talk about. I mean, this guy's loaded, but we only have 30 minutes, and I'm excited. And I didn't purposely send him anything detailed, so it's going to be very authentic, which is always good. And he's just got a tremendous amount of background and just ton of experience. So Sean, it's so good to see you. How are you feeling?
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and excellent. Always a pleasure to touch points with you, and hopefully more so in person in the coming months. I know it's been difficult, and hopefully with the fires, I think you guys have a true fire of innovation there in Southern California, and it seems like it's starting other fires too. So a little concerned, but hopefully it will be okay.
Yeah. By the time you guys see this, we are having the wildfires in Southern Cal. Hopefully by then it will have gone, but we actually had to restart our little connection a couple of times. And forgive me for the unclear image if there is any. But there's so much to talk about you and your background in ophthalmology. Tell the audience, for those of you who don't know you, real quick. You're known in the OIS, you're known in venture, you've had so many exits. Let's take a step back. I don't know you. Let's say I'm a new co-CEO. I'm new to ophthalmology. Give us a little background and why ophthalmology.
Yeah, I think, excellent. This is a good question. In fact, my kids sometimes, when they ask what your father's doing, they have a little bit of a difficult time explaining because they see me on any given day. I do wear different hats, and really that's what makes my life so interesting. And I keep telling them, well, you tell them depending on what you want to do with that person. Like me, if I'm at a party and somebody asks me, what do I do? And I don't want to have a long conversation. I usually say, I'm an ophthalmologist. I have my LASIK talk and I'm done. So that's the easy answer. I think the one where we get a little bit more in depth and talk a bit more innovation and talk a bit more about life. And what we do is when I get a little bit out of the square box and talk about my path in ophthalmology and how in a way different has been, although there are a few ophthalmologists like me as well, and it's something that really happened to me over the past 15 years. I got lucky to get involved in certain parts of our field that are beyond the clinical practice, and right now I guess who I am is what I do in a way. So I do clinical practice. I still see patients 1 day a week, which really keeps me fulfilled, clinically fulfilled. At the same time, in addition to being a doctor, I'm involved in innovation in ophthalmology, from technologies, medtech to pharmaceuticals, and really trying to bring us closer to the future of ophthalmology. And that's where I spend about 80% of my day. I'm a professor of ophthalmology at New York Pioneer Infirmary at Mount Sinai. And this is where we interact with the faculty and do some incredible things, particularly around what happened with COVID and taking care of our patients during these difficult times. But the rest of the time, I am involved in companies, for example, Inovia, which right now is one of the companies where I'm the founder and CEO, where we envision and develop the next technology for pharmaceutical delivery to the eye, or in other companies like Ayan, where we develop some of the med tech technology for cataract surgery. So again, I'm happy to be here, and some of the questions you have, I'm sure, are very loaded. So I look forward to discussing that.
Very loaded. Yeah, I mean, you're being modest. So he's a full professor of ophthalmology. He's the head of the innovation and technology at New York Eye. I was looking up some of your background, and even going as far as your residency days. There's some of the accolades. You were known to be out of box even back then. Even when I'm surprised they let you graduate, because you probably driven your attendings insane from all the knowledge you had. But so as an entrepreneur, as someone who invests in companies, I want to know, like, how do you manage your time? Like, you've got your founder of Inovia, you had a really good press release recently. How does your week look like? We know you're involved in a lot of things. If you were to teach that on to someone else, what would you recommend?
Yeah, I think it comes down to, as somebody else has said that before, and I'm sure successful folks like you as well would agree, it's about prioritizing your schedule and scheduling your priorities. I think that's and sometimes you can do many things, but always one at a time and really be focused. I think right now I'm singularly focused on Inovia. It's a company that we started about 5 years ago, which has transformative technology, really game-changing in terms of delivering medications to the eye. We've been married to the eyedropper for about 100 years now. We've been pipetting drugs to the eye, and we know what that causes. We know the irritation, the discomfort, and the fact that half of the time people cannot actually give the medication where it needs to go. I mean, I don't know how we tolerate this, in fact, because if we think about intramuscular delivery or intravenous delivery, when we prescribe a medication and we deliver it, we know it's in. When we tell to a patient, take an eye drop, 1 drop a day, we know that most of the time they don't get the right dose. So we've been able to use the inkjet printer technology paradigm and the piezo print technology, shrink the entire inkjet printer to something that allows you to print microdoses to the ocular surface and successfully deliver medications at the level of about 7 microliters versus what the eyedroppers do, which is about 40 microliters. And why is that important? Because your entire eye can hold 7 microliters. That's the physiologic dose. And every time I see a patient in my clinic today, I always am aware when they come red-eyed from glaucoma medications that they're taking, and said, well, this is what we need to change. There is a huge unmet need to manage compliance, to improve delivery to the eye. And so this is how I focus my time. I think today, and probably in the near future and over the past few years, I've really prioritized Inovia because I think it's time to change the 100-year-old paradigm. And also, we have some amazing therapies. So we have, for example, a phase 3 program, the one that we recently partnered with Bausch, which was a big announcement for progressive myopia. I mean, we have kids that are literally going myopic every day, and we have a solution with atropine eye drops that we can really deliver and approve and literally slow that epidemic. Progressive myopia is the epidemic behind the pandemic, and the pandemic with COVID will make the epidemic worse because our kids now are spending even more time in front of the screens and at home. So that can only make it worse because we know that every additional hour of being indoors, it increases progressive myopia dramatically. And then we have another program that's supposed to go into phase 3 now, which is for presbyopia. And you and I know how important presbyopia is, and we still use reading glasses. I'm coming to the presbyopic age too. So I would say it's a bit selfish, but I do want to have better options than reading glasses for myself when I get super presbyopic. And we have a pilocarpine microdose delivery for near vision through the near pinhole effect. And that is something that we're going to phase 3. So some really dramatic, I think, programs that make me rise every day and look forward to this, to know that we're going to have another treatment which will be a pharmacologic treatment for presbyopia and a new pharmacologic treatment for progressive myopia. So that's what drives me, and that's how I prioritize. And then I do happen to be involved in a number of technologies like Yantech with the MyLoop. And I would never have been able to pull it off if I didn't have a great team and some of my colleagues there with Brian Walsh and the entire Yantech team. Kudos to them. I mean, they literally didn't need me. They pushed that through amazingly after we started the company with help. And this is a plug for Visionary Ventures that were very supportive. So yeah, I think you need to keep your eyeballs on the target all the time. You need to put your blood, sweat, and tears into that. And at the same time, if you're going to be involved in something in addition to what you're doing, make sure that you have a great team behind it.
So let's talk about that, because here you are, you went public. You have a public company now, multiple phase 3, waiting for readouts. That's going all great, and you just had this great partnership with Bausch & Lomb, which is really good for them too, because as you know, they were involved with Valiant. They spun off. They have it's really a win-win marriage, in my opinion. That was brilliant. So that's going really well, and then. So at the same time, you wake up, you're like, wait a minute, let's do this robotic stuff. Let's talk about that. Like, how do you? So let's take a step back. You have to have a great team, and I think that's 100% correct. But then you have to also make sure there's accountability to the team, and that you're just involved, that they know you care and you're leading, but you're not like micromanaging so you can do your other stuff. Take us through that. What does that look like in your day? Because I think for audience members who are like younger or just starting in the entrepreneurial world, that's the secret sauce no one teaches you in med school, residency, even in B school. I would tell you that, not that I've been to B school, but I have a school of hard knocks like you. How do you manage that? That's really that's what for me is fascinating.
Yeah, it's good. And again, to your point about the robotics, I'm super excited about bringing robotics to the United States with the Precise system here at New York Eye and Ear and Mount Sinai. We just announced that. By the way, it is now 200th anniversary for New York Eye and Ear Infirmary. I mean, how cool is that? That institution is the oldest. Yeah, bicentennial. It's the oldest specialty eye hospital. And on the 200th anniversary, we're able to bring the first clinical robotic system with Precise. And again, this was a phenomenal team effort from the entire faculty. And again, wouldn't be able to do it. And it's not something that I could be proud of or to have accomplished on my own. Now, all of that is transformative, because think about robotics. It is in the best hands like yours, Exxon, as a great surgeon. Probably your resolution and precision is about 100 microns. With robotics, we can get down the resolution and the precision to about 5 to 10 microns. Now, at 5 to 10 microns, we can get better MIGS technologies. We can cannulate veins. We can do subretinal injections and a lot of things. So it's really game changing. And I think it's great. It's something that started for 3-4 years. Again, I have a friend of mine that says, yeah, this is the 20-year overnight success. When we present something and we announce it, everybody says, oh, wow, how do you do that? Well, a lot of these things are taking years, and they're years in the making of working with people and teams. And it's just that we see the end result. But again, to your point, how do you learn that? How do you teach that? Because I literally constantly interact with colleagues, and all of them are interested to do some innovation or to leave their careers or have a different path. And the residents here, everybody asks, well, how do we get into that? And unfortunately, it's like surgery. You don't learn surgery from a textbook. You can inform yourself, but you learn it from doing cases and really having role models and practicing. Deliberately practicing. So I think it's the same way around entrepreneurship. It's not a textbook, and it's something that I was thrown into that early on, a little bit by happenstance. It was not something that I deliberately intended. Although when I was at Harvard Medical School for my training, and coming from Bulgaria, when I came to this country at the age of 18, I was an immigrant right after the fall of communism. For me, the whole United States was a completely different world. And after the culture shock of that, I mean, everything else is easy afterwards. Coming from a communist country at the age of 18 without knowing anybody, I think that culture shock literally makes everything much easier. But going back to my realization when I was in medical school, which I think when I track it back is really what made me interested in innovation, is actually public health. And public health, when I was at a medical school, I actually did a second degree in Masters of Public Health, because I was really curious about public health. And I was really surprised that medicine was so disconnected in this country from public health, which wasn't the case in many other countries in Europe. And it was literally a separate track. So when I graduated from the public health school, one realization was that public health, or population health as we look at today, is so scalable. You know, with physicians, we can touch one patient at a time, or maybe 50 patients a day. Public health, you have a public health intervention, you change the lives of millions. But in fact, innovation is very much the same way. One innovative therapy or technology can now be millions. And so for me, it's great because, for example, when we came up with intra-operative aberrometry, and we developed the intra-operative aberrometry technology back in the days, which I invented in literally 20 years ago, that part now probably has treated about 2 or 3 million patients. And it helps to high precision cataract surgery in 2 to 3 million patients. I could never do that myself. When I was at Genentech and led the Lucentis development program, I mean, Lucentis is going in hundreds of thousands of patients and literally started the wave of biologic therapies. And that's great to see that. So is the Milo. That is really making a big difference for making surgeons so much more confident, and especially in the difficult cases. And sometimes, let's not talk only about the successes. Sometimes you have a success that's a failure, ultimately does not go where you wanted it to be. And that was the part of CyPass, which took 9 years of development with a lot of passion and a lot of great people, made it to the finish line, got FDA approved. And then several years later, we found out that it was causing some safety impact on the cornea, and it was withdrawn. It could have been the best mixed technology, should have been. But again, that's what happens in innovation. You do everything else, everything right, and you can never guarantee. And very often people say, well, how do you know which technology is going to make it? You don't. But it's the same way if you play blackjack. With blackjack, you never know. You cannot guarantee that the next card, your next hand, will win. But if you're counting the cards and paying attention, and you're counting the cards in the blackjack table, you'll probably win in the long term. And I think that's what counts.
Yeah. You're hedging your bets. There's so much there for those of you listening. You know, before we came on, we were talking about your peaks and valleys, and success is riddled with them. And CyPass is a good example of you did everything by the book, and then you just had this unexpected outcome. Not initially, later on, but a lot of entrepreneurs, they have what we call I was just talking to Bill Lincoln. We talk about near-death experiences, right? So you have the company. It could be a funding issue, it could be a technology issue, any variety of issue. And in your example with CyPass, at least that happened a little bit later down the stream when that transaction has already occurred. Imagine just starting out and right out of the blocks you have a near-death.
Right, and it was a financial success for everybody. I mean, it was a great transaction. But for me, there is always much more to this than the financial success, which has been really a blessing to see that you can make a great living outside just pure patient care. And for somebody who emigrated to this country with $200, it's in the pocket. That's great. But at the same time, for me, it's more than that. It's actually you using, hey, Sean, I used your MyLoop, or I used the intraoperative aberrometry or Lucentis or something that we've helped develop. And that's actually part of the standard of patient care, or moving the standard of patient care. For example, with Inovia, we're very much in the same place. Once people start using a smartphone, nobody goes back to a rotary phone. Once we get a technology for smart delivery, nobody will go back to a rotary phone, eyedropper. And we're going to Mars, we're going to space. Well, you cannot deliver medications to the eye in space with an eyedropper. unless you keep your eyes open and swim through them. That's not going to happen. So how do you do that? You need this horizontal delivery, microdose technology, piezo printing and all that. And I think that will be the next wave. That will be literally in the next 10 or 20 years, but it's not easy. A lot of near-death experiences. And ultimately, I think that the right technology will succeed. The question is who is going to be at the finish line. And from a venture perspective, that's also the question. Because if you're going to invest in a technology, you obviously could be early on or late on, and at different points in time, these companies go through different phases. But I always, again, I look at and I've understood a lot about the financial aspects of venture, and I've done venture capital for quite a while now. But ultimately, it comes down to your clinical gut and trying to think about clinical utility, because I think ultimately that wins the game and the team. The financial parts of it and raising the money, all of that can make a difference, and it can determine who is at the finish line or who is the ultimate financial winner. But for the technology to succeed, no matter how much money you put on a bad technology, it's gonna run out of steam eventually.
Yeah, and I as a clinician, it's funny you say I do use your stuff. I use the MyLoop and the Aura pretty much every week, and I was talking to Ernesto, our other good friend, and I don't think he's done a case without Aura, like in the last 5 years. If you talk to him, even monofocals, he'll swear by the Aura. And I remember before, it changed hands a couple of times. The original iteration, there's always naysayers that come out of the woodworks, right? So that's the other thing I think that you've done really nicely is, as soon as you have a good idea, I kind of now know if it has more naysayers, it's probably got legs to it because there's this volume effect that occurs. So would you agree with that? I mean, there's a lot of no's you hear when you're first starting out. I'm sure you heard a lot of no's on all your ventures.
Yeah, that's true. And frankly, some of the best friends that I have who cared a lot about me have given me the worst possible advice. And that's happened on a number of cases, partially because a lot of the things at the beginning are not obvious to anybody, including for example, we started doing the intra-operative refraction early on, and people said, well, who needs that? I mean, we're fine within one diopter mistake 20 years ago. And then for MIGS, a lot of people were saying, who needs MIGS? I mean, we have trabeculectomy and tubes working good. And these were people that inherently believed so. So I think that this is why it's so tricky, because one of these things about innovation, it's not transparent at the beginning. And sometimes you can get great opinion leaders or great minds just not be on that wavelength to see what will be there in a few years. And so who do you listen to and how do you do that? Not very easy. I cannot tell you that I absolutely, but one thing I can tell you, I listen to everybody for critique and I completely brush away criticism. And so critique, I try to factor in because it helps me refine my thinking and the technologies and how the innovation is. And frankly, the last thing you want is to not consider something, not pressure test it, as we say early on. And then 5 years of blood, sweat, and tears and money, then you say, oh my God, why did I embark? Couldn't I have seen that? Because ultimately, I think innovators, entrepreneurs, people like you and me, it's much more of an investment than just money. I think the venture capital community spreads their risk on multiple bets, so to speak, and ultimately they do well. But for an entrepreneur, you have to be all in and very often take an alternate path, which has opportunity costs. Opportunity costs in ophthalmology are pretty big. We've trained for 20 years to do something very specialized, very good, very fulfilling. And then if you end up prioritizing other things, then you have to give up something because you're not going to do 1,000 cases a year. You're not going to do 20 things at the same time. And so the opportunity cost is high. And that's why when somebody asks me, well, how can I do that? Or I want to leave my field because I'm really disenchanted with insurance companies, with the reality today. I say, well, really think about that because that is not an easy path, and don't necessarily make that decision because you had a bad day or a bad string of days. There's no guarantee. But that's again, I think, something to be factored in.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, there's so much there. I mean, you're doing it 1 day a week, you're teaching, you're still innovating. You've got other things you can't really talk about that you and I both know, and I would love to share for it, but it's too early. And there's so much there. But I think the other thing is, do you get are there days where like, okay, this is like getting way too old? Do you have string of days which are dark? And if so, how do you get out? How do you not give up? Because I think those are the tough times too, right? As entrepreneurs, there's times where we're just like 0 for 10, and things are just not happening. They're not there's no traction. A lot of us go through that. What makes you keep going? What is that?
Yeah, I have. In fact, more recently I had. Yeah, I mean, more recently I had a day that was somehow, you have days when everything happens at the same time, and that's okay. You can manage that. Maybe a little more stressful if you're doing a number of things, but you'd also have days when quite a few bad things happen at the same time. The good thing about time is that makes allows for things to happen at different periods of time. It's not everything happening all at once, but you do have those days when not only a lot of things happen at once, but a lot of bad things happen at once. And I think we've all had those days. You have them in the innovation as well. And frankly, the best way that I handle, and I don't know if it's true for everybody, but that's when I center into my family, into my friends. I have a call. I call my friends. I spend time with my wife and kids, and I just say, you know what, tomorrow is another day, and move on. No reason to carry a ton of bricks. But again, it's easier said than done sometimes. But again, the good thing about innovation is that it's a roller coaster, and there's always an up after the down. And sometimes when I'm up and when things are going well, you said, okay, well, let's see where the next dip will come, because it will come. Yeah. And sure. As long as you have that mentality and you try to keep an even keel, I think ultimately things even out, and it's a great. Imagine the people I've met and interacted with, like you, like Visionary Ventures, and a lot of the bright developers, engineers, and pharmaceutical developers, life science, biotech people, venture capitalists. I would never have met any of them. Some of them are great friends now, and they give me a different perspective beyond just the perspective of our field in ophthalmology, squarely clinically. It's a different wisdom, or a different prism of the same wisdom, which I totally appreciate.
That's great. Yeah, I think I'm going to call you the Steve Jobs of ophthalmology. there's different.
Well, today I wear my polo neck. Now that you said that, I wear my polo neck, but not because of that reason. It's very cold here, so I didn't wear it for that. No, I'm glad you put a black one.
I haven't never used that. Craig will tell you I haven't used that. I think it's because you have a good team approach. You're a scientist, but you're also a great overall manager. I think that's really key. And that's what Steve was. If you read his biography, it was just awesome. There's so much there, and I'm just delighted to just be your friend and follow your footsteps and see what you got next. And it's just great. It's just been a wild ride. I know we could talk for a long time, and I love what you said about your family. I think that gives you that more kind of compass, if you will, going back to your centration. If things are not going well, you go back, and I think that's critical. What's your routine? Tell us, like, when you wake up in the morning, what's your days like? Do you get up early? Do you go late?
Well,
how do you get your idea? Where does that pop?
That's highly confidential. But to your point, more recently, I had an interesting example that came to me just literally in this COVID era, which was I didn't expect. And it comes down to one realization as we wrap up. When I was in residency, and when I invented the intra-operative aberrometry, there was another technology that me and another resident, Peter Pham, who's a great friend through the last 20 years, we started, which is we were challenged at the time at LA County General Hospital doing perimetry for patients, and the wait list sometimes to do a perimetry test was months. So we invented a virtual perimetry that's online, and we really did that as residents. And interestingly, it worked great. It was the first virtual device, basically, that literally shrinks the hardware into a software. But we could never really deploy it meaningfully because Medicare and the payers had, unfortunately, one requirement that all telemedicine has to be done in the office, or physicians could not bill. With COVID today, 20 years later, one of the interesting, I'm getting all these doctors saying, Sean, where is your perimetry? Because I can't see my patients, or we can't do the perimetry in the office. And we put that into a foundation called Keep Your Sight. And we're gonna allow doctors to have access to it now, 20 years later. So It's interesting. So if you're an innovator, you have to be a Klingon. You have to cling on for a long period of time, because sometimes it does take time for the world to come to you, especially if you're something innovative. It may take some time for the world to come to your point.
Yeah. Well, with that said, it's a true pleasure. I'm gonna get you in here in a few months for your other stuff coming out, and it's just awesome. Skip, my best with the family, and I wish you nothing but health and success, my brother.
Thank you, Ayan. Always a pleasure. And stay away from those fires, from the wildfires.
Cheers, man.
Thanks for joining us for another episode. To learn more about Inovia and other innovative drug delivery technologies, tune in to our Drug Delivery Innovation Showcase on November 5th. Visit OIS.net to register for the virtual program or to receive the recorded presentations on demand. Until next time, keep on innovating.